Hello and welcome, my friends. This is your host, Mario Lanzarotti. Welcome to the Zenpreneur podcast. Today, I have the pleasure and honor of interviewing a dear friend and a brother. His name is Kieran Pollitt. He's a trauma informed transformation coach who empowers people to break patterns, heal past wounds, and express themselves authentically. His mission is for people to connect to who they are at their core, underneath all of the bullshit, the programming, the conditioning, the limiting beliefs, the wounds, and the trauma. From that space, we are free to express ourselves and shine the light we came here to share. Kieran works with the body and the mind, utilizing a wide range of modalities, including inner child work and somatics. And today, we're going to have a very powerful and value equipped conversation. So I'm excited to have you on the show. Kieran, welcome, my brother.
Yeah, so beautiful to be here, Mario. So excited to just dive in with you today and see what wants to move through.
I love that. Now, usually, and I always ask this question to my guests, is like usually people don't wake up this way, right? They don't usually just fall into working on their body, mind, and spirit and have such a strong mission to help people express themselves authentically. So I'm wondering, was there a time in your life where life looked very different for you and then you experienced some sort of an awakening moment, an event that happened in your life that opened you up to this path that you are now on?
Yeah, beautiful question, brother. And yeah, I think there were many moments of awakening like along the journey, and I could pick any number to start with. What I really think was a transformational moment for me that just like flipped a switch, and why I work with people around patterns, why I am so passionate about working around the unconscious mind, the programmings, the conditioning, like all of these things, is because when I started to meditate, that was a big shift in my journey. When I started to meditate, I started to become aware of being separate to my thoughts. I am the observer of my thoughts. I am not them. And then that started to open up my world a
Mm,
lot more. I was working with my first mentor as well, and just having someone there who could reflect back to me, like be a mirror to see what I couldn't see, started to change a lot in my life. And there was a moment when I was in an 8-person house. I was living in Oxford at the time, and one of my housemates said to me, "We need to talk about the dishes." And as she said that, I felt this anxiety, this anxiousness fill my solar plexus and my heart. And I was like, I had been meditating, so I was aware of this, and I was like, what is going on? This is a
mm,
really big response to have to what she just said. And she wasn't just saying it to me, she was
mm,
saying it to, like, to the house, but saying it to me. And I was like, what's going on? And I went away from that because I was in that moment, I was in a flight response. I was like, I don't want to be here. I want to get out. Like, my body was communicating, this doesn't feel safe. And so I went away and I was like reflecting on this and thinking, like, why would that be the case? Like, why would that activate me in this way? And I started to reflect and realize that as a kid, like, I would hide under the bed. I would hide in the closet. I would hide in the bathroom. Like, I would hide at times because of ways anger and frustration was projected onto me when my parents was dysregulated. And suddenly this connection was made. Wow, like, I experienced this conflict and confrontation through anger and frustration being projected onto me. What was happening in that moment was I was present in that moment, but my mind and body are there to keep me safe. And they're saying, this is perceived conflict and confrontation. It's not safe. We need to get out of here. And that started to make me realize, as I connected
mm,
that dot, I realized how that showed up so much through my life, how conflict and confrontation and my fear of it
hmm,
had shown up in so many different ways. And then I started to get even more curious about, like, well, what other patterns, what other things, what other experiences from childhood, from my teenage years, from just being an adult have impacted how I show up. And that's why I'm so passionate, because I lived so many years being influenced by something that I didn't even see. And I also developed people pleasing tendencies around that and around other wounds of rejection, of abandonment. And so when I started to become more aware of these wounds and how they showed up, well, then I could start to do the work to bring the healing from the awareness to the healing. And now, there's still things that I don't know. There's still things that I can't see, which is why I work with coaches. And at the same time, I'm in the most aware place I've ever been. And I'm so much more in choice of how I show up because I'm more aware and I'm able to be more intentional with how I live. So that's why I do what I do,
Mhm.
because I want each person to start to choose how they live rather than do it on autopilot.
That's such a profound statement that you just made, and it's so, so true. Most of us, we're not living by what I call a conscious choice, but we're living by an unconscious choice. So there's a part of us through the conditioning that we have gone through in the past that makes unconscious choices without us even being aware of it. Right? It just happens automatically. And like you said, most people in the world live their life on autopilot and they have no clue that that's even a thing. They just think, oh, well, that's just the way that life is. That's just how I am. And I love that you had this insight where you looked at yourself in a moment where you felt triggered, right? Where you felt a sense of fear inside of your body. And you were like, wait a minute, why is this happening? Where's this coming from? And I think this self inquiry is really the first step to embarking on any significant change in your life. And so I'm curious what happened next. So you've had this sense of awareness, right? You had this experience with mentors and coaches, and where did you take it from there?
Yeah, so from there, I was already, and in terms of like how I took it to where I am now, I was just continuing to be my own case study. I was continuing to experience different
Ooh.
things and and be curious, right? Like I was curious as to like what different practices would bring. Like I tried the meditation, I was trying cold showers, I was trying yoga, I was trying, I went on a long journey of celibacy. Like I've tried many things and I was just continuing to try and experience through the world because that we can understand something and be like, oh, well, this is the benefit of meditation from my textbook that I read or from what I hear on Instagram. There's a difference when it starts to be like, well, this is what I've experienced. And so I have continued since then to just be curious and continue to, as I said, be my own case study in these different ways. And really from that moment, like the work that I was doing, and a lot of this is the work that I really am passionate about, is connecting to my inner child. So this part of me that had this experience in the past where there was this emotional charge that was present. And the emotional charge is what causes the level of activation that I was experiencing in the trigger. And so going back and being able to dissipate that charge through that inner child who like didn't had something that they needed to express in that moment, but in that moment it was I couldn't express it. I was scared, I was terrified, I was like, no, I'm not expressing anything. And it's also not being modeled. And so when that's the case, like there's stuff that's not being expressed and that stays in the body energetically, it stays in the body emotionally. Trauma is stored in the body, and so that experience is stored in the body. And then it's once that can be expressed in a safe way, how can I meet the needs of that part of me, that version of me, that inner
Mhm.
child? And so much of this journey is all these different parts of me, whether it's an inner child, in a teen, in an adult, whether it's a part that is self-sabotaging, whether it's the part that yeah, like all of those things are trying to protect us at some level. They are here to serve a purpose. And so much of this journey for me has been like meeting those parts with love and compassion and starting to see what the need is underneath that and start to meet that in a more conscious way. And that's been the journey of unfolding and unfolding, is how can I bring more consciousness to these things? How can I bring more compassion, and how can I meet my own needs? And as humans, we have needs that are beyond ourselves. Like the need for belonging is a human need and it requires other people. And we can start to look at what are the needs that don't require other people, and are we looking to the external world, object referral, for the validation, for the approval, for all these other things, and
Mm.
looking outside of ourselves. So this is the journey that I went on, and I continue to study, to go deep. Last year I did a certification with the Medicine Coaching Institute, and that went deep, and that went deeper into trauma, into somatics, into inner child, like a number of modalities. And I was being coached every single week. So as you can imagine, Mary, like there was like transformation and depth that were just being received. And yeah, and that's the journey that I've sort of been on with, like, since that moment.
Mm. I love that. And I love the statement you made about I'm my own case study. That's so powerful because you look at yourself not as a fixed identity, but you look at yourself as an ever evolving being. And I think that really is one of the key essences of helping you become unstoppable in the world. Because and then you also go further, you essentially, you did say that there are certain human needs that require other people. And you said, but there's a lot of them that don't require other people, that require your loving attention. Ram Dass has this mantra. He said, I am loving awareness. I am loving awareness. And I think it's so profound because when you cannot have awareness without love. Right? If you have awareness that comes from a place of, oh, why the hell am I doing that? That's so stupid. Again, me, look at that. I was coached by Elementum. I shouldn't be struggling with this anymore. That's not loving awareness, that's judgment. And that really holds you in the patterns that you actually want to resolve. And you also talk about trauma. And I would love to hear your perspective on trauma, how it affects high performance, and what you think is, or what you have used in the past with your own clients. What is a powerful way of resolving that?
Yeah, beautiful question. And I think trauma is so, we live in a society, Gabor Mate says it, we live in like a traumatized society full of traumatized people. And trauma, like, isn't what often people can look and say, like, okay, this is a distinguishing trauma. This is trauma with a capital T. Maybe it's like somebody goes through a natural disaster, somebody experiences sexual abuse, uh, like physical abuse. Like
Yeah.
there's certain things where it's like, oh, this is trauma. Trauma in itself isn't the event. It's what happens in the body in response to the experience, to the event. So we don't have a choice
Mm.
in what is traumatic. And this is really important for people to understand, because it's easy to say, well, I didn't have it that bad. And when we say that, we start to be like, okay, well, I don't need to look at myself because this
Yeah.
person had it worse off. And though we
Yeah.
may think we're um, being like righteous, or like we're not righteous necessarily the word, but we're being like, yes, okay, well, I don't need to look at this because I'm thinking of other people. It's like, no, you're actually not thinking of yourself, and you're not going inside to see how that may have affected you. And trauma
Yeah.
is occurring when there is too much, too soon, too fast. Too much, too soon, too fast is where trauma happens, because it's too much for the body, it's too much for the nervous system.
Yeah.
And how this can impact high achievers, there can be many reasons. People can be high achievers because of trauma. They can be high
Yes.
achievers because they are seeking validation, acceptance, approval from mum, dad, but they're doing it unconsciously through how they get. And it doesn't matter how much money they get, it doesn't matter what accolades they achieve, it will never be enough because they are seeking externally. So it can show up in that way. It can show up in like responses, coping mechanisms to trauma. There are many of them that exist. It could be people, drinking, smoking, sex, drugs, porn, like, and things like overworking, overachieving. They can be coping mechanisms, but they're more validated by society. And so this is something to be aware of as a
Yeah.
high achiever. Like, it's not the thing, it's where it comes from. And if you're achieving and you're achieving and it's coming from a place of, well, like, I am one, I am whole, I am enough as I am, and I'm doing this because this lights me up and this is what I love, and I want to maybe see what I'm capable of in this human existence, like, epic. But if it's coming from a place of, let me just continue to like get the next thing, get the next thing, get the next thing, but it's not fulfilling my core, then that gets to be looked at. And so for high achievers, it can show up in many different ways. It may show up in how they communicate, how they it can show up in how they're activated within their body. There's many different ways, and in terms of how to work with this, is becoming aware of it, becoming aware of what the pattern is that shows up. So, it might also be high achievers. It might not just be work, right? It might be how you might rush things in work. So you rush things in life. You may have certain relationship dynamics in work that then come through and into different areas of your relationships in the real world. Like your your social life. So it's being able to recognize that. And the work is the awareness, as we've already talked about. What is the pattern? How is it showing up? Because if it's showing up in your work life and in all different areas of your life, like how we do anything is how we do everything, is a perspective I love to look at, because then we can start to connect dots and be like, oh, well, it's not just showing up here. It may also be showing up here. And so it's the awareness, it's the recognition of the pattern. And then there's things you can do on like a high level, like a surface level. Like you can start to become aware of the pattern, and maybe it's, let's say, something that then you do the opposite of. So you have the conscious awareness. This is what the pattern wants me to do. This is what my ego is saying. Instead, what I'm going to do is, so someone might be high achieving and they are a lone wolf, right? They may be like, well, I don't need anyone else. I'm going to just carve out this path and I'm going to do it myself. And actually, like that may be a pattern. That might be a wounding. And so doing the opposite of that is like, how can I ask for support? How can I be open to receiving more from other people? And that's actually more likely to lead to higher levels of success, higher levels of achievement, more connection, more community. So that pattern, then the opposite of it is, how can I start to receive more? How can I start to ask for help? And so these sorts of things, it can be hard to see it when you're in it. And that's where, like, having someone, you, Mario, as a coach working with high achievers, to reflect back to them and the work that I do in working with patterns and healing the wounds underneath them. So there's the surface level, like looking at triggers, looking at things that activate you, exploring this. Then the deeper level, as I said, there are needs not being met. There are things not being expressed. And that is also the work that I believe leads to long-lasting change, because we can work with up here and the conscious, but as we talked about and you spoke to earlier, the unconscious, which is controlling 95 to 97% of our actions, our behaviors, that is where shifts start to transform long term.
Yeah. Boom, 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 boom. So good, and so true. And there's a couple things there, right? One, I love the distinction that you brought forward about trauma. There is the capital T trauma, which is the things that are really significant, somebody attacked you, sexual abuse, you witness a death in front of you, accidents, things like that, right? Where everybody goes, oh, of course, I get that. And then there's the lower T trauma, where it could literally be you being in the first grade, you raising your hand, the teacher asks, what's 2 + 2, Mario? And Mario goes, it's 6. And the teacher goes, oh, no, it's not. And then the other kids go, ha, 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 ha. Right? And in that moment, there's a sense of shame. There's a sense of embarrassment where the body freezes. And what I find really interesting is, I always like to look at nature. Right? As the Zen philosophy that I follow, always look at nature. What is nature teaching me? How does this show up in nature? And there was a video once that I watched where they were explaining the difference between trauma in people and in animals. And animals, when they have traumas, think of a zebra getting attacked by a lion, and the zebra gets away, and might have a severe fright. What it will do is will go into shaking. it will shake the body so that it can release that stagnant energy that is sitting there, right? That is too much for the body, so it releases it through shaking. And I know you do shaking as well. I saw that on your Instagram, and I've done that as well myself. Where I don't know the name for it. I'm sure there's a terminology for it, but I shake it, and then you pull the tongue out, and you go and you shake it, and it really
Yeah.
works. It really works. It looks weird as fuck. Excuse my French, um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it really does work, and that's amazing. So I love the
Mm,
distinction that you made there, and also very clearly, just like you said, I can so relate to this example where this trauma that was created in my past created this belief system that says I don't need people, I don't need anyone, I can do this myself, or I have to do this myself so I can prove myself, so I can prove my worth. And for the longest time in my business, things took me way longer because I was like, okay, I'm going to research it on my own. I'm not going to ask for help. Now, fast forward, 5 years later, I'm here, and whenever I need anything, I go into my network. I ask people. I have so many connections all over the world, and success is now way easier and with way less effort and a lot more fun, more connection. So I love that distinction that you brought forward. And I want to ask you, you mentioned earlier, you talked about a dysregulated nervous system. Can you
mhm.
explain a little bit more about the nervous system, what it means to have a dysregulated one, and what it looks like if you have a regulated one?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, in terms of our nervous system, like that is part of the body, part of our being that helps to communicate messages, sends messages from the mind to the brain to the body, and yeah, just how things happen in our body. And in terms of a dysregulated or regulated
Mm,
nervous system, uh, there's a model called the window of tolerance, which is really powerful to look at. And if you imagine just a big green rectangle in the middle, this is our window of tolerance. This is where we are in homeostasis, we are in our optimum state, and we can access
mm,
both logic and emotion and really just be regulated. Like, this is where we are. What happens is, as stresses build, or as we have a big activation or trigger, we can move into dysregulated states. And dysregulated states are states where we no longer have access to logic. We go into emotion, and it can take us into, if the trigger is significant, it can take us into the survival brain. It can take us into survival modes: fight, flight,
yeah,
freeze, or fawn. And when we're in those spaces, we aren't consciously choosing. We're just reacting. And this can show up in different ways. There's hyperarousal, which is, imagine it as a big red rectangle at the top of the screen. That's where you're more like high energy, anxiousness,
mm,
overwhelm. It's these high frenetic states that you can experience. And then if you were to
yeah,
go down, there's hypoarousal, which is uh, associated with freeze and fawn, which is more low, unmotivated, depressed, numb, these sorts of experiences. And the power of recognizing when you are dysregulated or what that looks like, because also it shows up in the body before we go in there. Like, the body can start sending sort of essentially like an alarm system, like, okay, we're getting stressed, something's up, like the alarm's sounding, like. And when we can start to connect to the body, we can start to be aware of that. It may be tension in the jaw, it may be like heaviness in the chest, it may be tension in the hands or fidgeting in the body, IBS for some people. There's many different ways it can show
mm,
up. Not making eye contact, speaking too fast, not speaking at all. So the body communicates to us that we're moving towards more dysregulated states. And
yeah,
the more we can become aware of, firstly, when we get into dysregulated states, we can then start to use regulation tools to bring us back, which means that we can come back into that window of tolerance and be in a more regulated state where we can actually be more conscious of what we're choosing versus
yeah,
reactionary. And yeah, then we can just start to, the more aware we become of that, we can start to become aware of what the signs in our body are. And so we can start using regulation tools before we've even gone into these survival responses. So the power
mm,
of understanding dysregulation is the power to start to be able to respond rather than react. And it
Yes.
it takes time, because sometimes people have lived a lot of their lives in survival brain, in survival mode, in fight or flight. And it takes time for the body to adjust, because the body and mind are like, they're also they want to keep you safe, and safe is familiar. So if you've been in that state, like, it's used, your body is amped up to be in that state, or if it's in the down regulated state, it's like it's used to that. And so it's starting to create new patterns, new safety within the body, within the nervous system, to be able to live like in that more regulated state and to come back. And one thing I'll mention as well, it's like, it's not like you learn these tools and then you just do it when you're dysregulated. It's like an athlete who goes to trains for an event. They train every single day and then they run the race. So regulation tools supporting your nervous system is something you do every single day. And then when the thing happens, it's like, okay, well, I've got these tools that I can go to. My body's in a more regulated state. Like, I'm more
Yeah.
aware of it. And therefore you can
Yeah.
live, as I said, a more regulated life where you are able to be more responsive to life rather than reactive.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so important to really understand. Also, to your last point, where you said it's like an athlete. You have to continuously condition yourself to operate in this new paradigm where you choose to regulate your nervous system throughout the entire day, essentially, right? I have done well
Mm.
over a decade of personal development in the work, and still to this day, I have my note here, right? It says slow down twice, because my my original programming is all about fast, go, 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 right? And I have a lot of energy in me, so there's this part of me that wants to just sprint. And I have had my fair share of experiences with that to have realized that there's a better way for me. And I think you described it beautifully. As you said, in a regulated state, you get to make choices that are not coming from this frenetic place. And so when we look at the life of an entrepreneur, the things that are going to take you more time, more energy, and are going to cost you money are the decisions you make that are, some people will call them not smart, right? Some people might call them stupid decisions, right? Whatever we call them, these decisions are essentially ineffective, right? Because, talk about procrastination, perfectionism, self doubt, imposter syndrome. Essentially, from what I'm hearing, they're all expression of a dysregulated nervous system, because the person lives in this constant fight or flight state. And if you look at the landscape of entrepreneurs, which is one of my absolute biggest missions, is to help entrepreneurs get away from the grind, from the burnout culture. And you said this earlier, the challenge with it is that it's being celebrated. Right now, you look at certain entrepreneurial circles where if you work 15 hours a day, you're the king or the queen, right? You're the shit, just, yeah, man, keep going. And they survive on alcohol, drugs, porn, and junk food. And the challenge with that is you cannot last long. You might have these short bursts of productivity, if you want to call it that, which is essentially you're just adding so many hours because you're not effective in the work that you do. Where if you had a regulated nervous system, you could probably get the same amount of work done in a fraction of the time, if not even more work done in the fraction of the time.
Yeah, and what's important to mention as well is, like, if you have a less regulated nervous system, if you're amped up in fight or flight and these sorts of spaces, like, it's it uses energy. Like, it uses energy to be in those
Yeah,
states. So it's also like
yeah,
you are using more energy, that you have less of that for other things. And so that's also
yeah.
like part of it is, and I love what you're sharing here. I think the patterns, like, they play out for the needs and the wounds underneath and things like that. And they will be contributed to when you start to go into dysregulation, you are more likely to be in your patterns. So like that's what you're
Yes.
saying is like that
Yeah.
when you're overwhelmed, it's because you're moving towards more dysregulated states. When you're going into self-doubt, you may not be in a space where, like, and if you're dysregulated and you're moving into these things, you're not able to look at them in a rational way and start to break
Yeah.
them down. Yeah.
Yeah. And as a side note, for all of you health coaches, and coaches that generally work with trauma and healing trauma and regulating the nervous system, if you could make the connection that Kieran and I just made, you can work with any business, any company in the world, because what you're offering them is absolute gold. Like, this is like such a big key to high performance. And I think it's extremely important that more and more people learn about the importance of understanding your nervous system and regulating it with tools such as breath work. And, maybe you can talk a little bit before we jump to the next topic. Like, what are some tools that you use for yourself, that you use with your clients, like daily go-to tools to regulate the nervous system?
Yeah, beautiful, Mario. So you have different tools for whether you are upregulated. So if you're in the hyperarousal and you're in the high frenetic energy state, you will use different tools to if you are in the uh, like lower
The lower
hypoarousal
one.
state.
Mhm.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. And so they've got different tools. Essentially, they come. So, for example, breathing can be used in both of them, but the types of breath work are different. So when it's, let's say you're in the higher frenetic state, there's different things you can use. You can use, as you spoke to, primal shaking, right? You're in fight or flight, like shaking the body out, starting to allow that energy to have a space to move. You can use different forms of
Yeah.
breathing. You can use box breathing. So in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. You can use breathing where it's longer exhales than inhales. You can use grounding techniques, so tuning into the 5 senses. If you're feeling anxious and you're feeling in that higher frenetic state, what are 5 things I can see,
Yeah.
4 things I can touch, 3 things I can hear, 2 things I can smell, 1 thing I can taste? A lot of it is coming back into the
Mm.
body, coming back into a grounding. So yeah, having your feet on the earth, going into nature, these are things that can really support that as well. Meditation is a
Yeah.
tool that I use every single day, like, because I know it supports me deeply in this. And there are, yeah, a number of different tools, and I've just listed some there. If you're in this like state up here, warmer warmer foods, warmer drinks, like things like that can really support as well.
Mm.
And then if you're down here, you can use things that are going to upregulate you, that are going to shift your state. Dancing, like moving your body, movement, exercise, um cold showers or cold water on the face. And again, there's like, everyone who's listening, like, you are a sovereign being, choose how you use these things. um Cold showers, you can use what else to upregulate? Yeah, Wim Hof breath sort of thing, breath of fire. And again, this is working. A lot
Yeah.
of these things that I'm talking to now are working with the body. They're working with somatics, using pillars of breath, movement, sound, and touch. It can be vocal toning. Maybe it's like making the sound om, or using your voice and singing. These things support regulation, they
Mm.
support the nervous system. And so when we know this,
Yeah.
we can start to then implement those tools daily.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. I think that's more than enough for people to tap into and to use. And I always say, pick two from those, right? Pick one
Yeah.
tool that will get you up, pick another tool that will help you ground. And I think that's more than enough to get started and practice with. And now, what I would love to talk about with you, Kieran, is you talk a lot about the authentic self, and
Mm.
sharing this authentic self with the world. One, what do you how do you define the authentic self, and what's the big deal about it? Why should entrepreneurs and high performers invest their time, energy, and money into this authentic self?
Oof, I love those questions. I love the second question. So for me, the what is authenticity? It is who we are at our core. Like, I believe we come here, we have a soul, we're this being, and it's our essence. Like, we're born onto this planet, and we have an essence, a way of being, a light within us. And that's our authenticity. And then it's, as we go through life, we have all these different perspectives, all these different experiences that pile a lot on us. You know, there's a story about a golden Buddha that gets covered in mud to protect it, and then it was to protect it from being taken, being stolen, and it was moved hundreds of years later, and the crack was seen in it, and the gold was seen through, and it was removed to see this what people thought was a clay Buddha or mud Buddha was gold. And that's how I see it, is like, to protect ourselves, we sometimes cover ourselves in these stories, or we take them on, and underneath that is the gold, is the essence of who we are. And when the more connected we are to that, the more connected, I believe, we are to our truth, we are to our essence. And when we live from that place with the mission that is on our hearts, the reason that we are here, that is the impact we have just from being us ripples around, and it starts to create a whole new way of being for everyone. The more people who are in their truth, the more people who are sharing their gifts, the more people who are shining their light. I picked up a tea for this talk today. What it says on it, which is like wild, right? The world needs your unique gifts. Don't leave with them still inside you. Right? That's what I picked up, that tea bag, and this is the conversation we're
I
having.
love that.
Yeah. And so that's why the authentic self, I believe, is so important, because it's why we're here. It's our essence.
Yeah.
And then why is it so important for businesses? Why is it so important for high achievers? Because when you are more connected to who you are, when you are more connected to your essence, how you move through the world is different, because you're grounded in a truth of knowing that is you. You're not trying to be something else. You're not trying to be someone else. You are clearer on why you are here. You are able to connect that to the mission that you are serving in the world, and show up with a deeper level of connection, a deeper level of passion, a deeper level of knowing of why you are here. And that might mean, when you connect to that there's a change in direction in what you are doing, because what you are doing and why you are doing it are different reasons from your truth. So it may be that connecting to your authentic self speeds you up on the journey to getting you on the path the path you're on is your path, but gets you onto the direction which is your truth. And the more you can live from this space as well, like, it becomes your way of being is the service as well. Just how you are is creating the impact in the world. And yeah, that's really what's coming through for me there, around like, why is it so important? And also, you will just attract people from the vibration that you are at. If you are more connected to your essence, your truth, your energy, and you're at that frequency, the people you attract in your life will be like on the same level. And that's going to change things as well, because maybe you attract the same sort of people, the same sort of problems, the same sort, and that's all the program, that's all the conditioning, that's the patterns. But when you're more connected to your essence, you've moved through a lot of those. What you attract, how you attract, how fast you attract things, all shifts because you're clearer on your truth, and you're being that. And I would love to know, Mario, like, from your perspective, what you think about this.
Yes. Thank you for asking me that as well. And this is one of my favorite topics, because, as you know, and as my listeners know, I am a very practical person, because I don't like to dwell on ideas and things that have no practical, relevant application in this world. Essentially, I want to talk about things that make our lives better. Right? I had a very small t traumatic time in my school, where I had to watch a lot of the teachers talk about so much nonsense, and I always was the guy that asked, are we going to use this in real life later? And they were like, no, but it's for the test. And I would completely zone out. And it's like, yeah, I'll make sure that I'll cheat myself to get a decent result in the test, because it's anyways useless knowledge. That was me in the past, right? But I think this topic of authenticity is a high performance superpower. Think about it. When you're authentic, you are you. You don't hide stuff. You're being who you are. You don't have to invest energy in holding yourself together, which is really, I say, the number one energy expenditure is trying to be someone that you are not. Like, I'm sure you've experienced this. I certainly have, where I used to go into groups of people and I would just sit there and hold it together and not really share how I feel or what I think. And so I would come out of that meeting and I would feel exhausted. I'd be like, oh, God, ugh, I just want to go home now and I just want to chill and just don't do anything. And I would always ask myself, why do I feel this way? And then I would blame the other people. Oh, they're just so toxic and la 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 la. And I'm like, no, it's not because of them. It's because I'm choosing not to be authentic. I'm choosing to lie to myself and other people. And that, when I truly got that and I practice being authentic more and more, and also fuse it with vulnerability, because I think the two of them are mates that go together in a very powerful way. The more I did this and the more I accepted my authentic truth, the more I came to have peace within myself. And when you have peace within yourself, you are operating from an energy optimum. You're operating from your center, which means you don't waste any energy. It's like everything is in, some people call it flow, right? Everything just flows and happens, and you're clear and in your authenticity. Just look at children. Children are the perfect example. Children are naturally confident, courageous, creative, and curious. And those four qualities are so crucial to entrepreneurial long term success. If you don't have them, forget about it, right? You're not going to get there. But I think if we come back to authentic nature, to who we were as a child, and we don't have to take all of those childlike qualities. You don't have to throw yourself on the floor and throw a tantrum and just say, "No, I want those cookies." Maybe not that part, but essentially, authenticity, the way that I would describe it, is returning home. It's coming back
Mm.
to your own home within yourself, where you are operating from a place of wholeness, where you are regulated, where you are in your center, where you become that human being that can withstand any storm, because you always find your place back home, because home is where you are, is who you are. And yes, that's what I would say my opinion is on authenticity.
Yo, brother, I love that. And I love that those words at the end, finding your way back, like home, because you are home. And that's it, is I think on
Yeah.
this journey, when you know that you've got yourself, you know that that's
Yes.
also the authenticity. When you know that you've got yourself, so you can show up authentically. And it's okay if this person doesn't accept it. It's okay if this deal doesn't happen in the way you thought, because you're not making it mean anything
Yes.
about you. It's just you showing up and you're sharing your gifts, you're sharing your light, you're sharing everything. And it's like, it doesn't matter how it's received, in the sense that the sun
Yeah.
shines and it doesn't matter if you're hiding away in the shadows, the sun's still shining. And that's the same sort of essence
Yeah.
of like the authentic self and how we get to shine.
Yeah, exactly. And that essence makes you unstoppable, because many entrepreneurs, and I've experienced this myself countless times, where I would hope for a coaching client. Oh my God, okay, she's going to sign up. That's an extra, 10K and then I'm going to do this and I'm already in my mind creating an expectation and creating a whole fantasy around that expectation. And then it doesn't happen. Poof, and I'm left devastated, disappointed, feeling rejected. Oh God. And now what happens? Now the next hours or the next days are going to be, I will be showing up from a dysregulated nervous system, which means less creativity, less focus, less energy, you name it, right? And we can go on and on and on. But I think this is really the key. So I love that you are pointing this out and that you are taking a stand for that. And, with the time that we still have, I would also love to get your opinion about another topic that we haven't talked about yet, and that is money, right? It's the
Yes.
one of the at least top 3 priorities, if not number 1 priority for entrepreneurs. And so how do you approach money? How do you ensure that you have this abundant relationship with money and that it is something that has longevity so that you can create more of it, but you're not doing it from a place of the dysregulated nervous system? I'm curious on your perspective.
Yeah, beautiful. Uh, yeah, money is an interesting one in our society, right? Because when we talk about patterns, when we talk about programs, when we talk about conditioning, how much money conditioning is there? How much talk is there that money is evil or it's bad or that like you can't have so much money?
Hmm.
And you can see it in terms of how people shit on other people who make a lot of money, and like that's their limiting beliefs coming through, like why does that person deserve that amount of money?
Yeah.
And essentially what I see happen a lot, and I've done this, like, and I still do this at some level, is I was putting money on a pedestal, and I was saying this is money, it is
Yeah.
above me, it is that, and then it's going to be hard to attain because it's up here. I'm putting my worth. I'm saying
Hmm.
there is a deservingness of money. But when we recognize we're already deserving, we are already enough, we are already worthy, like fully of everything. Like it's not even deserving. We are just enough, and we are worthy. And then it's money is on a level playing field and
Yeah.
suddenly becomes so much more accessible. And for me, it's something that I'm still developing, still working through because, like, based on the level of finances that I'm at now, if I had even stronger money beliefs, I would be further along on that path. And that's just how it works because it's our
Yeah.
relationship, it's the energetics to money, it's the relating to it. And so being able to see our patterns around money is so powerful.
Yeah.
And for me, it's really understanding money is about receiving. How open are you to receiving? Which is also the same with love. Love is about how open are you to receiving. So seeing, for me, it's a journey of seeing, well, how can I be more open to receiving? How can I be even more clear when money comes in? If money was on the other side of the table to me and I'm having a date with money, what am I saying about money? What are the conversations? Is it,
Hmm.
you'll never hear, like, I need more of you, like, fuck you, money? Like, what's the conversation, right? Because does money want to be in your world? Right? Does money want to be in your world if
Yeah.
you're having those conversations?
Yeah.
And it's like we get to
Yeah.
treat money as a beautiful energy. Money can enhance impact that we have on this world. Money in the hands of people who are conscious in how they use it is beautiful because it can not only support us in living a more
Yes.
abundant lifestyle, it can support everyone around
Yes.
us. And that is the gift that money is. So the relationship that I'm developing with money is one of also just recognizing. Ken Honda talks about this. He talks about arigato money, like thank you money,
Happy money.
every time he spends it, every time he receives it, and just creating that dynamic where
Mm.
it's like money flows. Because I think I've definitely been guilty of this at times, and there's no judgment of that. But I've held on to money.
Mm.
I've held on from a place of scarcity and lack, like, and that says like when's the next bit going to come, like what's it, and then that stagnates the flow, and money is an energy and it flows. So there's all these different, I mean, money in itself is such a vast topic that we could go into so much.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, and what I feel and what I'm really connecting with at the moment is as I create, as I serve, like money will come to me. And so my focus now within myself is more of how can I show up? How can I be of service?
Yeah.
And just keep being in that essence. And from that space, like I trust money will come in because I'm giving my gifts.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that you said
Yeah.
it beautifully, and it's really about the way that you relate to it. And you already gave some tips, because every time you are spending money and you are receiving money is easy for most people. Like, oh, thank you, I'm so happy, yes, awesome, love it. But spending money is where I have to spend this much money for my car, or I gotta buy this plane ticket. Oh God, prices have gone up, the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's like that's your energy for spending money. And oftentimes I see the people that are very much in a scarcity relationship with spending money, they struggle to invest in themselves
Yeah.
specifically. I've had, I'm sure you've had many of those conversations with people that are like, oh, I'm really interested in hiring a coach. And then as it got to the money part, let me think about this. I'm not so sure. And then, sometimes I check in with the same people a half a year later and like, and how is it? Yeah, it's still the same thing. I'm like, there you go. It's your relationship with money that is preventing growth. And I think it's a very important topic for us to reflect upon as entrepreneurs because it's one of the top two or top three priorities for an entrepreneur. So we want to make sure that we are in an abundant and open to receiving and giving relationship with money so that it is natural for more of it to flow in our business, in our life. And I think you gave a lot of practical tips today on how we can move ourselves into a more abundant relationship, not just with money, but with life in general, by regulating our nervous system, by coming back to authenticity and operating from that centered place. And so, as we come to the end of the conversation, Kieran, you did share with me that you had a gift for our listeners. So, I would love for you to speak a little bit into that gift. And then also, how can people find you and connect with you to explore more of Kieran Pollitt?
Yes, beautiful, brother. I'd love to just add one more thing before I share that, if that's good with you.
Please.
Yeah, so I just want to say as well, like, money is an energy. So look at how you are receiving everything in your life. Like, look at how open you are to, because so often, or what I found for myself, is that I got hyper focused on money and seeing money as abundance. Money
Mm,
was abundance, money was success. And yet I was ignoring all the other places that abundance was present for me. I was ignoring all the other places success was showing up for me. Because you can have a ton of money and you can have a dysregulated nervous system. You can have, like, you can feel low self-worth. You can feel all these other things that may not support you. And you can have a lot of money and feel amazing at all those things, right? So it's also recognizing all the different spaces that abundance exists, that success exists in our lives, and being able to, as I was saying
yeah.
before, like, really receive that, really find gratitude for that. Because what we focus on expands, and that's what we're doing when we're having gratitude. We're seeing the abundance, we're seeing the different successes, and we're recognizing all the stories we have around money and what that means, and also where we may be putting it on the pedestal. So I just wanted to speak to that,
Mm,
about bringing in an even more abundant lifestyle, because so many people associate abundance with money. And I say that because I did it. And yet
yeah.
abundance is so many more things. And the more you are tuned into
Yeah.
that, the more of abundance will be received.
Yeah. I
So,
love that.
yeah, thank you, brother. And
Mm,
so, yeah, the gift that I have for all of you who are listening is access to a training that I did called Chaos to Calm: How to Regulate Your Nervous System. And in this, I really go through three key things. I go through the awareness, how to bring more awareness to what is the nervous system, the window of tolerance, why it's so important to understand, because this is the contextual model that then helps you to move through life and relate to regulating your nervous system. I then talk about
mm,
how you can have the recognition of what's happening in your body. As I said, the awareness of the body is giving signs that you are moving there. The earlier you can intervene, the earlier you can bring yourself back down to a more regulated state. And then I give you regulation tools. I give you somatic regulation tools. So movement, sound, breath, movement, sound, touch, and give you practical tools. 12 practical tools for upregulating, 12 practical tools for downregulating. And so this is, if you
yeah.
want to dive into the nervous system and regulating it, this is going to support you so deeply for all the reasons we spoke about today. And then where you can find me is on Instagram, Kieran Pollitt _. And I also have a podcast called Living with Intention. And yeah, that is where you can find me if you're wanting to engage more in my world. It would be such an honor to have you join, to have you jump into the space. Drop me a message, let me know you're coming into orbit, you're coming into the space, and I would love to connect with you And likewise, I'd like to share with just anyone who is in my world, who's listening to this, to really like get into Mario's world. He is amazing at what he does. He's a very present man. He's a really beautiful soul, and like his energy is very grounding. He's very in himself, and yeah, like he's got a lot of love, and he moves through the world in a beautiful way. And so for anyone who's in my world, check out Mario, because he is supporting people in living more abundant lifestyles, making more money in a more zen approach, in a more embodied approach, in a more connected approach. And that's what we all desire, I believe.
Thank you very much, my brother, for these beautiful words and for the gifts that you shared today with me, with our audience, all the tools and the insights, and really the power of authenticity that you brought forward. And I think you are living that truly. For those of you that get to spend time with you personally, which I have several times here in South Africa, you really are living your truth. And I applaud that. And I think that's beautiful. And so, thank you for being a guest on the show. And also, thank you, my dear friend, as the listener and watcher, for being here and for making this possible in the first place. And with that, we are complete. And I look forward to seeing you on the next show, on the next episode of the Zenpreneur podcast.
Thank you, Mario.